Hello, everyone, and welcome to Audio Judo. I'm Matthew,
And I'm Kyle.
and this is your podcast of music discovery. I don't know what you're laughing about.
Your hearing being shot. Please
It
continue.
is Sha. We're proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, your premier source of music podcasts. I think that was my throat that just took a dump for a second. That was weird.
Wow, this is great. You can't hear, you can't talk. This is going to be a good
It's
podcast.
good podcast. It's good entertainment right here.
Be a great episode. I'm dying slowly of a cough. You can't talk. Neither of us can hear.
It's
This is
good.
gonna be
It's good.
great.
It's fine.
My video is
Pantheon.
going to freeze any second. Sorry. Please continue.
Pantheon is the only place you could find the only official Metallica podcast, the Metallica Report. In addition to that podcast and this one, actually, we don't produce the Metallica Report, but it's on the same channel that we are. We also produce two other podcasts, Audio Judo Does Jazz, which takes a look at the world of jazz, and Throughline, which takes a look at one album at a time and explores the concepts on each album, whether intended or not. That program recently started season 2. You can find both of those shows on Pantheon as well, or wherever you get your podcasts. So,
We
go
could
ahead.
take credit for producing the Metallica podcast all the way up until the point where those guys kick our asses.
Yes.
Just all the way right up until that second where they're like, you,
We could just
you're
keep
going in the locker.
keep claiming it. Just like, no, we
Yeah.
do it. Prove that we don't.
100% us.
So for this week's episode, I decided after a 1 week off ramp of the Sex Pistols to return to the world of massive industry producing and defining albums.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah, when we talk about albums that helped to define very specific eras, there are a few albums that are bigger than the third album by the Canadian artist Alanis Morrisette, 1995's Jagged Little Pill. Jagged Little Pill was a worldwide commercial success, topping the charts in 13 countries. It sold 33 million copies worldwide, one of the best-selling albums of all time, made Morissette the first Canadian to achieve double diamond sales, so more 10 million twice. So it's actually triple diamond.
It is now. Yeah, it's that's that weird RIAA registry thing. Like, so you have to go back and ask them to recertify you.
Oh,
So like, and in fact, I think you have to ask them to certify you to begin with.
like petition, like to be, you have to ask
Basically,
them to do it.
well,
That's weird.
you have to ask them with some dollars
Mhm.
to say, "Hey, can you please certify my gold album?" And then they do, and then
Yeah. Okay.
it's a very
Well,
very
yeah, I didn't-
convoluted process, but
and totally on the up and up. It sounds like.
oh, absolutely. There's nothing mysterious about it.
No. But Jagged Little Pill was nominated for 9 Grammy Awards and won 5, including Album of the Year, making the then 21-year-old Alanis Morissette the youngest artist to win the top honor up to that point. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has it on the 200 definitive albums list. Rolling Stone has it number 69 on its 2020 list of 500 greatest albums of all time. It sold records. It sold records. It's got its very own Glee episode dedicated to it. It's inspired a Broadway musical of the same name that has 15 Tony nominations. Alanis would be recognized as being responsible for inspiring a huge list of female artists that were to come, like Pink, Fiona Apple, Avril Lavigne, Meredith Brooks, all these names. And the album came out at a very pivotal time in music. Grunge was starting to wane a little bit. We had lost Kurt Cobain the year before. We were beginning to see the start of the singer-songwriter era, where there was less of a focus on the band dynamic that dominated rock for the better part of a decade. I very much remember the first time I heard You Ought to Know and being like, what the fuck is this? You know, actually saw it instead of heard it. That was usually the route that was taken. It was taking on some real heavy hitters in the music industry at the time. Hootie and the Blowfish's Cracked Rear View was dominating at the time. TLC's Crazy Sexy Cool had been all over the pop charts. Shania Twain was crossing over back and forth with Come On Over. So, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on, and you were suddenly getting a lot of female voices at that time too, which was awesome. You know, it was definitely changing the musical landscape right around that time. Critics generally were positive when the album was released. even more so as the years have progressed, which is odd for a 90s album to have that kind of revisionist, like, oh, it might be better than we even thought.
Yeah,
Uh, Robert Christgau gave it a B plus. Great for him, right?
that's
Uh,
very good for Robert Christgau.
I think so. But the general consensus seemed to be that this was a pop accessible version of Liz Phair. I
Hmm.
think that's the way it was looked at. Sometimes angry and snarling, although not nearly as much as people seem to think it was, but refreshingly honest and sincere. It's a tremendous piece of pop alternative music that really is the work of two musicians, um, two with a really pretty big age gap between them, 20 years between
Yes.
them, coming together at the right time and finding some magical chemistry in the studio. Um, Before we talk about Jagged Little Pill, though, we should spend some time talking about the artist that made the album, Alanis Morrisette.
Yeah. She was born Alanis Nadine Morissette, June 1st, 1974, in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. She actually has a twin brother, Wade, who's only 12 minutes older than she is. In 1977, her family moved to Lahr in West Germany, where her parents worked as teachers on the Canadian Air Force base, on a Canadian Air Force base, which I had no idea that the Canadian Air Force had such a strong enough contingent to have their own Air Force base in West Germany during the Cold War. But that's
I,
pretty cool.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, they ended
For
up returning to. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, they returned back to Canada, and
Hmm.
and for all I could see, she lived a relatively normal childhood up until like 10, 11, or 12. She was raised Catholic, attended Catholic
Mhm.
school, began taking dance lessons. She appeared on the CTV, Canadian television sketch comedy show You Can't Do That on Television, when she was 10 for a few episodes. I saw those episodes because the show used to air on Nickelodeon in the afternoons after I got home
Yeah.
from school, and I watched it every freaking day. I literally never missed it. It was on right after Mr. Wizard's World, which I also
Yeah.
never missed. And I remember all of her episodes. Like I remember like all the names, Kevin Kubishevsky and Moose and all those names. I watched that show religiously. Um, but then at the age of 15, she had actually been recording for a while, but she recorded her very first demo at 15, a song called Fate Stay With Me, and a second one followed soon after. That demo was recorded onto cassette, submitted to Geffen Records, and subsequently lost when the offices were burglarized in Los Angeles
Yeah.
in October of 1989.
Yeah. And
Apparently,
it's
a lot of
never been
stuff.
found.
Yeah, apparently a lot of stuff was taken in that
Yeah.
robbery. So we got fires destroying music warehouses in L.A.
Hmm.
We got burglaries in L.A. in just taking music. What the hell is going on out there?
That's why I moved here. I'm actually trying to destroy the music industry from the inside. So
Slowly but surely.
slowly but surely, I'm
Ta-
taking one thing at a time. I go visit like Capitol Records and take a pen. I'm like,
That's the way to do it. That's the way
yeah,
they'll never catch you doing it
they'll
that way.
never catch me.
Somewhere around 1990, she was signed to MCA Records Canada, and there's some background on that. So, uh,
Hmm.
John Alexander, head of A&R for MCA Records Canada, first heard a demo tape from Morissette in 1983 when she was 9 years old. He called it very promising. Her voice was very strong, and it was remarkable that the tape included some original songs written by her at that age. Remember, 9.
Yeah.
However, he decided not to sign her to a record deal because, from an A&R standpoint, he said, "What am I going to do with a 9-year-old?" In 1987, Morissette met entertainment manager Stefan Klovan at the 1988 World Cup of Figure Skating, I'm guessing in Canada. She recorded a well-received version of "Oh Canada" with two musicians, one of whom was Leslie Howe of the new wave synth-pop duo One to One.
Hmm.
Klovan intended for Howe to work with Morissette so she could audition on the television show Star Search, but eventually both he and Howe decided to try and secure a record contract for her instead. So, one of the demo recordings Howe and Morissette created with keyboardist Serge Cote in the studio was "Walk Away," for which Howe filmed a video. House sent the video to Alexander, who arranged a dinner meeting with Morissette, and he could tell that she was a very focused and passionate 14-year-old girl. Yeah, apparently he could tell that a little too well, as we will find out
Yeah.
later.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm. This is a gross, sad story, folks.
yeah. But we'll get to that one later. The next day, he met with Morissette and her parents, told them he wanted to sign her, but MCA Records didn't like that choice. They wanted her to continue to work on a publishing deal instead. MCA Publishing financed her record deal, though. They decided that, give her a shot with Hot Mustard Records, an independent label for developing new artists. And the album was recorded in Ottawa in 1990, late 1990. And I'm sure you've read all this stuff, Kyle. But according to Alanis, people from MCA placed pressure on her to lose weight in time for the album's release, and she developed anorexia and bulimia. She went into therapy. She would often go to straight from school to the studio, where she would stay until 3 or 4 in the morning and write and record music, drink, smoke pot, hang out with what she called an older crowd, because we all know it's about image.
Yeah. The whole thing, like reading about this, and obviously in retrospect, it's hindsight is always 2020. But all I can think is, like, how would her parents let her go do this? Like, how in the world could you just be like, go hang out in a studio, clearly come home drunk and smelling like pot? Like, I guess you're a musician now. Go hang out with a bunch of older men. Like, it seems so crazy to me. But maybe there's more to that story that we don't know about.
Right,
but,
and they were pretty, from what I could tell, they're a pretty conservative, religious family.
Yeah.
Catholic family. But it's, it's weird. I think I have a similar experience. I was raised in a similar household, Catholic household, pretty conservative household. Yeah, I got away with all that shit for years.
I guess that's true.
So yeah. But anyway, Alanis, her first record, was released in April 1991 to mixed reviews. I don't know if you listened to it, but I did. It's not good. It's an unimpressive mix of Tiffany and Debbie Gibson.
Yeah, it's definitely a very poppy album. It's definitely a very way overproduced album. It did sell pretty well. It did. It went double platinum. I'm sorry, it went platinum in Canada.
Platinum
which is
Canada,
80,000 albums, but that's still 80,000 albums for a new, very young musician is pretty good.
It went double platinum there, right? So 100.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
it did. Yeah, I read that wrong. Double platinum. The single from it, one of the singles, "Too Hot," reached top 20, and the other two singles, "Walk Away" and "Feel Your Love," also went top 40, which is pretty good for a first-time album.
Right.
But I agree.
You wonder how many units, like, it's currently out of print, but you wonder if any units were moved in the wake of Jagged Little Pill, because I do know that the record company, Maverick Records, who we'll eventually talk about, went to great lengths to distance themselves and distance Alanis from those first two records. Like, we don't know anything about those. This is their first album, I promise.
I don't know, but I mean, I got to imagine, today it's easy to figure that out because you can look at Wikipedia or, just search on the internet and it immediately comes up. 1990, 1992, that wasn't happening. You had to know somebody who knew somebody who was like, oh no, I know somebody from the industry who says she has 2 other albums that were only released in Canada, which already sounds like a bullshit story. But, oh yeah, my girlfriend from Canada knows she has her first 2 albums. She got those on vinyl. So.
Sure you do. Sure. She didn't have 2 albums. It says it's the premiere album, but I have them. But anyway,
my girlfriend's got them. So.
In October of 92, during the very height of the grunge period, Alanis released her second album, Now Is the Time. This album, which again is pretty weak in relation to everything that came after it, was more of a ballad record. Critics described it as wistful and uninspired. Always good stuff you want to hear about your content. But she was beginning to spend more time writing her own music, something that would pay dividends on the next record. This album, Now Is the Time, was only released in Canada. It still went gold there. Um,
Yeah.
but like we said, it wouldn't even be acknowledged by the record companies in the future. But thankfully, as she puts it, this was her last album on her deal with MCA Canada, and she was able to clean slate to some degree, get a fresh start. So in 1993, Morissette's publisher at MCA Music introduced her to manager Scott Welch, uh, and he was very impressed with her voice and her character and her lyrics. She was still living with her parents in Ottawa, and they decided it would be best for her to move from Toronto or move to Toronto and start writing with other people. So after she graduated from high school, you have something to say, I can tell. Go
I was just about to say, again, her parents are like, "You're 18, yeah, I think you should definitely move to Toronto and just
Yeah, just get
hang
out
out
of
with all
here.
these young male music executives and yeah, get out of here, go make some music."
Yeah, just get out. Get out.
What?
See the world. Just get out. So after she graduates high school, she made the move. Her publisher funded part of her development, and then she went. She met producer and songwriter Glenn Ballard, uh, and he believed in her right away enough to let her use his studio. That meeting Glenn Ballard, was the most important thing that could have happened to her.
That was actually after she moved to LA, right?
Yeah, yeah. She
'Cause
wasn't in
she
Toronto
so,
for long.
no, she was only in Toronto for like less than a year.
Yeah,
It just didn't work out. She didn't find anybody to work with, and then she moved to LA. That's where she met Glenn Ballard, and that's where his studio is.
right.
I think that
Um,
step was missed. So.
yeah, I missed that step. Sorry.
No
I don't
worries.
know. I
Uh,
feel like I skipped right over it because it's right there. I was reading along and I jumped it, jumped the page.
yeah,
Uh,
but talk about like the perfect match. Like they complement one another so well without trying to override one another's styles. Like Glenn being an older man who's much more experienced with music, he normally you would think, okay, great, that's going to be the dominant personality. He's just going to steamroll, Alanis and be like, this is what you need to do to make a good album. And instead, it's very collaborative. They're bouncing ideas off of one another. They're working incredibly collaboratively. Lannis is coming up with lyrics. Glenn's writing the melodies. It's working out really well, and it's become this amazing. Wow, just totally lost my own train of thought. It's become this amazing, collaborative effort that continues. I mean, it's
yeah,
great.
yeah. At this point he was a very successful songwriter and producer. He had co-written "Man in the Mirror" by Michael Jackson. He
Mm-hmm.
had co-written Wilson Phillips' huge hit "Hold On" and produced that record. And he was introduced to Alanis Morissette as a songwriter matchup that the industry regularly did to spur some creativity and help younger artists develop good habits and some structure. Um, and apparently, the musical chemistry and just the friendship chemistry was so good that within 30 minutes, they were already writing music.
Yeah.
Within 1 hour, they had written a song called The Bottom Line, which was not originally included on Jagged Little Pill, but was included in deluxe editions later on. And he was impressed and surprised by her authenticity and maturity. And because of that instant connection, he suggested they immediately enter his home studio and start recording. So they began in mid 1994 recording the album that we're going to talk about today, Jagged Little Pill. So, according to what he says, they wrote together in the studio, just the two of them, with Ballard handling the majority of the instrumentation and Morissette focusing on lyrics and vocals and some piano and harmonica. And they recorded as they wrote, putting together a substantial chunk of material in a very short time. But they tried to record and write, or write and record one song per day in 12 to 16-hour writing and recording blocks, which, first of all, is a long day. But almost every single vocal take was the first or second take done. And when they eventually went to record everything in a proper studio, those vocal tracks were mostly the ones chosen for the actual record.
Mhm.
That they were just good, that good from that raw, that they would continue to use it. So in late 1994, they began working on a proper 5-song demo and began to shop the album to labels. And they were passed over by
By a
many,
lot.
many labels. Labels that I promise you were kicking themselves for the next decade as she's selling albums in chunks of millions. And so Ballard starts to suggest maybe we should release it independently, until her lawyer stepped in and arranged a meeting with the head of A&R for Maverick Records, Guy Osiri. And he was blown away. And for anyone keeping score at home, Maverick Records is a label owned by Warner Brothers Music, but at the time was being run by Madonna at that
Hmm.
very specific time. Um, so the album was released on June 13th, 1995. Was released really only with the intention of selling enough records to get a chance to make a second record. Um, but when K Rock, the very, very influential Los Angeles radio station, began playing the lead single, You Ought to Know, it began to get some attention. And then the video for that song was released and entered heavy rotation on MTV and Much Music in her native Canada, and it began to ascend the charts. It wouldn't go quick, though. It took 4 months for that song to get to number one and remain there for 12 weeks,
Yeah.
as well as number one in 12 other countries. And the album uh, charted and stayed there or stayed on the charts for 72 weeks.
Hmm.
Sold
Crazy.
33 million copies worldwide, 18 million in the US alone.
Yeah.
It's huge.
By the end of 1996, it had sold 18.7 million copies, and it did
That's
a
an 18
string
months.
of that's in 18 months, and it
Yeah.
did a string of 15 consecutive weeks where it sold 500,000 or more copies.
That's
Which
insanity.
is that to me is the most nuts number, because it's like when you say, oh, they sold 10 million or 15 or 20 million, it's like, great, yeah, over a years long period. No, they sold, or she sold, what, 7.5 million albums in 15 weeks
Yeah.
at 500,000 a week. That's mind boggling.
Crazy.
I think you already said this too, but nominated for 9 Grammys.
Yep.
One for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance, Best Rock Song, both for You Ought to Know, Best Rock Album and Album of the Year. Won 5 Juno Awards, which are like the Canadian Grammys in '96. Album of the Year, Single of the Year for You Ought to Know, Female Vocalist of the Year, Songwriter of the Year, and Best Rock Album. Um, yeah, it's just absolutely crazy how big this album got.
Yeah, so she would spend the next 18 months touring the record, supported by, of all bands, Radiohead, which
Hmm.
doesn't make sense to me. But
Yeah,
18 months, the last single from this record wasn't released until after the tour was over.
yeah,
She was off the road, probably in the studio for the next record, or resting, maybe, who knows. But she wasn't actively supporting this record anymore, and they were still churning out singles from it. And it's a monster record. And
yeah.
it's a very good record, taken into context when it was released and the music being put out around the same time, and what the music industry was at that moment.
Yeah.
It's a very '90s record.
I think we've talked about this before, but I really feel like the '90s was this generation of like just in the right place, just in the right time musicians. Like it was, and I'm sure that a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were actually starting to communicate with one another a lot more. And, because of that, the world was a little smaller. So like grunge is a perfect example. It was like there was so many perfect grunge musicians that were ready to go at just the right time to make grunge happen. And then along comes Alanis Morissette, kind of as grunge is starting to fade out. And she's kind of the first, but then there's this giant wave of powerful female singer songwriter musicians who come along and completely change the music landscape forever, but at the time, more specifically, for a couple of years. And then we hit like 2000 ish, and you get that, like third wave punk movement, and you get that, the kind of, rock and roll revival, and you get the, early 2000s, like first wave of electronica music. Like it's crazy. It's crazy that all happened in that 10-year period.
I agree. We'll talk about the artwork for a second.
Yeah, sure. So the art direction and design is credited to Tom Richon. Tom's a sound and visual artist, composer, art director, graphic designer. He's been working in California since the 1970s.
Uh,
What?
so Randy did something. It's no big deal.
Oh,
But yeah, he's actually the founder of the Los Angeles Free Music Society,
yeah.
which is a legendary group. It's been around for like 4 decades.
Hmm.
It's really interesting stuff. I encourage everyone to go check that out if you can. And then
Yeah.
the go ahead.
I was just saying, he was an art director for Warner Brothers for a number of years, and Capitol and EMI Records, and then he became the global art director for Levi Strauss. Weirdly enough,
Ah,
but yeah, and now he does. Now he's a freelance designer, and he makes clay pottery. So
oh, nice.
and
And then
music and tons of music.
tons of with
Yeah, with the Los Angeles Free Music
LAFMS.
Society. Yeah.
And then the photography was done by John Patrick Salisbury,
Hmm.
San Francisco-based photographer who specializes in black and white. Um, and his stuff is not in the popular cultural sphere. He's more of a artiste.
Yeah, he seems to be like looking at his website and some other websites that came up when you search for his name in photography. He seems to do a lot of like gallery showings. Lots of them are pretty small. You know, he's not like some like Andy Leibovitz type of photographer, but he's very good and his artwork is beautiful. So
Yeah, so if we didn't describe the cover, it's
mm,
a picture of Alanis Morrisette kind of crouched on a hilltop in Malibu with another picture of her face superimposed on it, kind of treated in shades of red and blue and green. It's very 90s, you know? The color hues, the typography, the layers of photos. This is still either before Photoshop or very, 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 very early Photoshop. So it was
yeah,
still most likely done manually. It's a very intensive process. I don't hate it, but it's it's It's
yeah.
it's
It
definitely that era.
it's very generic, but I would be super curious to know. Like you said, this is kind of either very early or even pre-Photoshop. I'd be super curious to know what they did to create this. Is it a manual like overlay collage? Is it like hand trace transparencies? Like what was it, a manual process or what? I don't know. I couldn't find any information about it. So
Let me reach out to Thomas Rachon. You're
Thomas Rachon.
gonna get an answer, but it's
Yeah.
recognizable for sure. But I think more so because it was everywhere. Um,
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, it's not a standout cover because of it's so fantastic. It's a standout cover because you saw it for at least 2 or 3 years all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so, should we take a little break? Come back, do track by track?
Yeah. It sounds like a plan. We'll see y'all in a
Wonderful.
second.
Okay. Today's show is brought to you by Atomic Podcast Services. Are you tired of spending hours hunched over your computer struggling to edit your podcast episodes? Do you want more time to create instead of editing? Well, we have the solution for you. Introducing Atomic Podcast Services, a premium podcast editing service that will take your show to the next level.
With Atomic Podcast Services, you can say goodbye to tedious editing tasks and hello to a polished, professional-sounding podcast. They will expertly enhance your audio quality, seamlessly remove background noise, and ensure every episode sounds crystal clear. But that's not all. As part of their premium service, they will also help you with ID3 tagging, scheduling, and posting of episodes, and for a little extra, even create engaging audiograms to promote your episodes on social media platforms. There's even a discount if you subscribe to their monthly services. With Atomic Podcast Services, you'll have more time to focus on what you do best, creating incredible content.
So why waste another minute struggling with complex editing software? Let Atomic Podcast Services take care of the technical side while you focus on captivating your audience. Visit their website at atomicpods, that's pods with a Z.com, to learn more and book your editing session today. Hello, this is Matthew from Audio Judo. Are you looking for additional Audio Judo content? Stuff that will make you laugh with an emphasis on music? Then you need to subscribe to our Patreon page, and this is how you do it. First thing, head to our site, patreon.com/audiojudo. Our Patreon site is the only place you're going to find all the extras that we work so hard to provide. There are Judo Chops, which are mini episodes. There are bits that are taken out of episodes for whatever reasons. Some bloopers, some full interviews with artists like Steve Hackett from Genesis. We have 3 tiers currently. There is the Shout It Out Loud tier, which would only cost you $1 in the US. For that amount, you get a shout out by name at the end of each episode. For $5 a month, little step up, the front row tier, you get a shout out on each episode, early access to full episodes, and access to all the bonus content. With a more significant investment, $20 a month, the Backstage Pass tier, you get everything that is available at the other tiers, a special personalized gift from Kyle and I. Most importantly, after paying for 1 year, you get to host an episode of Audio Judo with me and Kyle on the album of your choosing. We have completed several of these. They're a ton of fun. You can find the link to our Patreon account on our website, audiojudo.com. But if you can't find it there, it is patreon.com/audiojudo. Thanks for subscribing. And now back to the probe. All I really want,
Is what?
my two front teeth.
Oh, okay.
So this was the sixth and final single from the record. Hit the market in December of '96, almost 17 months after the release of the album.
That's nuts.
Nuts. However,
Still made a shit ton of money.
it did. It was released as a single, but not for purchase in the States, in an effort to boost album sales, as if they needed to do that. And we're gonna circle back around to this concept a little later on. But even so, it got to number 65 on the Radio Songs Airplay chart and number 14 on the Alternative Airplay chart. Two charts I did not know existed. So remember that that song that Glenn Ballard and Alanis wrote that first day, The Bottom Line? This song was created out of the bits and pieces from that song and was actually the last song written for Jagged Little Pill. It's actually heavier and grungier than most songs on the record. And I think the first two songs together give people that have purchased the album the wrong impression about what this album really is. Is it heavier than her other albums? Most definitely. But in the scheme of what else was being released at the time, not really. And it's not nearly as aggressive as I think people seem to remember that it was, or even what they thought of it back then. All I Really Want sounds like this.
And there I go jumping before the gunshot has gone off. Slapped me with the splintered ruler. And it would knock me to the floor, but I wasn't there already. If only I could hunt the hunter. And all I really want is some patience. A way to calm the angry vice. And all I really want is deliverance. Do I wear you?
It's thick. It's very
Yes.
thick. For two people and a handful of session musicians and a couple of other stars that'll come up. But you know, it's very thick, and lyrically, it's typically confrontational, as this album is. You have to remember that she was no more than 19 years old when she wrote all the lyrics for this record. People were very surprised by the angst on some of the songs, including this one. But really, were you? A late teen, man or woman, is going to be dealing with those types of issues. So not only was this not surprising, it was probably necessary.
Yeah.
I think the only surprise was the frankness and openness with which, you know, how she dealt with it instead
Yeah,
of
I think it's-
what she was actually feeling.
I think especially in later songs too, where she really starts to open up and she's very raw and very honest about what she's feeling and what's happening in her life.
Hmm.
I think that was startling for a lot of people to realize she was only 19 at the time.
Right. So you're like, oh, she went through all that. She's got to be like 27, 28.
Yeah.
No, 19, which means, you know, you're recording it at 19 and it's happened before that.
Yeah.
Yes. So she references the character Estella, And the
from
song,
Great Expectations.
right, Estella is the girlfriend of Pip in the Charles Dickens classic Great Expectations. That is not Grate Expectations by Edmund Wells, the well-known Dutch author.
Hmm.
And only a few people out there will get that reference I just made, but that's a little Easter egg for you, for any of my friends, because you'll laugh about it. So, Estella was a very refined, smart girl and grew up in the same orphanage as Pip, but she was unable to reciprocate any of Pip's love for her, suggesting that the lyric, I'm like Estella, I like to reel it in and then spit it out, means that she can suck in all the compliments and love, but don't expect to get anything in return.
Gross.
What? She said spit it out.
That's true. She does say that. I also find it kind of interesting reading about this, or like doing some research into this song, where they talked a little bit about her and Glenn's songwriting, the way that they like to work. And so the second line in this, "My sweater's on backwards and inside out," was literally what started off the writing process for this song. Alanis came into the studio to start recording. It was after they'd been gone for Christmas break, so it was pretty cold out. She was wearing a sweater, and it was on, backwards and inside out. And Glenn said, "Your sweater's on backwards and inside out." And she said, and grabbed a notebook and started writing. And then they made this song in like the next hour. Crazy.
It is weird because, when I wear my sweater inside out at work, nobody says anything.
Yeah.
I may write a huge hit song with that kind of information, but no.
Yeah. There's also a really interesting instrument used on here called a groove activator or a groove box. It's a weird little digital drum machine that was created in the 1990s. Here it was programmed by Gota Yashiki. They're weird little looking machines, man. They look like a picture of a computer from the 70s. Like, it's the one that I saw a picture of is bright orange. It has a little tiny like green and black screen, and you program it much more like a computer, and then it spits out a beat.
I wish we got a picture of that.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Next time.
You ought to know, Kyle.
What? I ought to know what.
You ought to know something.
Okay.
Probably a bunch of stuff. But this is the lead single from the album. Put Her on the Map, Put Her on the Path to Superstardom. It is considered, and rightly so, the ultimate bad breakup song.
Yeah.
When it first came out in 1995, it was a revelation. And I would say that most people saw it for the first time when they heard it for the first time. And the video for the song was quite memorable. It was really heavily saturated. It featured Alanis snarling, sneering at the camera, and you were left to wonder how someone so pleasant-looking could be so angry. The song also featured a very young Taylor Hawkins on drums. Yeah, that's a sad one.
Yeah.
But with all the popularity that this song had built up, the label still did not release it for sale as a single. So the song only charted when it was released as a B-side to You Learn, eventually rising to number 6 on that chart. But in July 1995, it made number 1 on the modern rock chart. And in September, it peaked at number 13 on the airplay chart. So number 1 on the modern rock chart, never releases a single. Again, playing with numbers. So the song discusses the fallout of a breakup. Is notable for the raw emotion expressed by Morrisette, a trend that was just appearing among female artists at the time, especially in terms of sexuality. But who had any idea that someone like Uncle Joey from Full House could elicit such strong emotions from anyone?
Dave Coulier, like you said, Uncle Joey from Full House. He's so much fun. He's because he was in a relationship with Alanis Morissette. No big deal. She was 17 and he was 32 or 33 at the time.
Right. So this has been discussed and admitted and then retracted and readmitted by him and others since the song was first released. But the strong belief is that the song is about Dave Coulier. Alanis refuses to say it, much like Carly Simon not revealing the subject of You're So Vain. But my belief is that it is an amalgam of gentlemen. There's speculation that it's one of her ex-producers or maybe a hockey player she was involved with. But either way, I wouldn't want to be that guy because that's... Well, go ahead.
I would say Alanis claims that she's pretty sure this guy doesn't know. So that's why a lot of people were like, Dave Coulier. There's a probably apocryphal story, but Dave Coulier claims he was driving along in the car one day. This song came on the radio. He was listening to it, and he's like, "Wow, this girl really has a lot of pain, and it must have like really hurt her. Somebody really hurt her to make this kind of a song." And then at the end, they're like, "It's Alanis Morissette's new song. You ought to know." Blah 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 blah. And he's like, "Oh my god, that was Alanis."
Right.
And then he went and bought the album and listened to it over and over and over and was like, "Oh shit, is this about me? I didn't mean to hurt her like that. I need to reach out and find out." Supposedly, he reached out to her. They got together and spent a day together talking. And afterwards, they had apparently patched it up. And, it was not about him, according to that initial interview. Since then, he has come out and said, "It is about me."
Yeah.
And then he's retracted that and said, "No, it's not about me. It's about somebody else.
It keeps happening. And Bob Saget also said that he was at Coulier's house when that phone call came through.
Yeah.
The phone call mentioned in the song, which is that's silly. But yeah, in 2014, he said again. He said that guy in the song is a real asshole, so I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
But he's going at lengths to distance himself from it. If it is, Uncle Joey or Uncle Joey, that's something. So the song is one of the only ones to have well-known players playing on it, indicating Glenn Ballard's belief that the song was something special before anyone else did. After the original demo was completed, the label contacted and had Dave Navarro and Flea from the recently rebuilt Red Hot Chili Peppers come in and redo the guitar and bass parts, giving this song a lot more punch than most of the other tracks. Also brought in was Ben Montench, organist for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, who ended up playing on 5 songs. Flea said of this experience, he said, "It was very instinctive. I showed up, rocked out, and split. When I first heard the track, it had a different bassist and guitarist on it. I listened to the bass line and thought, that's some weak shit. It was no flash and no smash, but the vocal was strong, so I just tried to play something good. And it sounds like this."
Did you forget about me, Mr. Duplicity? I hate to bug you in the middle of dinner. There was a slap in the face, how quickly I was replaced. And are you thinking of me when you fuck her? 'Cause the love that you gave that we made wasn't able to make it enough for you to be open wide. No. And every time you speak her name, does she know how you told me you'd hold me until you died? But you're still alive, and I'm here to remind you of the mess you left when you went away. It's not fair to deny me of the cross I bear that you gave to me. You ought to know.
Listening to that back, now that I know it's Flea, because I don't think I knew that it was Flea playing on this in the
I
first
had no
place.
idea either.
Wow. That is a busy bass line, and it does give it a very distinct flavor.
Yes. And once you know that it was Flea, you listen to it again and you pick that bass line out and you're like, "Oh yeah, okay,
course
that
that's
makes
Flea.
sense." It has that signature feel to it. It has that signature sound to it. It's really good though. I love it.
Yeah, so this song, go ahead. You go.
Oh, I was going to say, you already mentioned Ben Montench, but did you read about what his payment was for this?
I did. You go ahead.
He came into the studio. Glenn invited him into the studio. Was like, "Hey, can you maybe help us punch some of these songs up?" And he worked all day to like help punch up 5 or 6 different songs of this album, depending upon which source you read. And then they took him out to dinner, and that was his payment.
You get a nice dinner, maybe a nice lunch,
Surf
possibly.
or turf,
but not both.
but not both.
Not both. So this song won Grammys for Best Rock Song, Best Female Rock Vocal. Along with Bruce Springsteen and U2, Morissette became the only artist to win the Best Rock Song and Best Rock Album in the same year. It's such a good song, and a really important one in the history of music as well. paving the way for it to be okay that women could be that angry and that raw
Yeah.
in music. Of the time, it was very much like Tori Amos, who was being frank with her songs in much more aggressive music stylings, much more
Yeah.
in your face instead of gently behind a piano. She's coming at you, ready to just slug you in the mouth.
I love it. It's such a
Perfect.
good song.
It is a great song.
I
Perfect.
mean, I don't know if it's perfect, but it's pretty good.
Oh no, the next song is named Perfect.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a song about parents trying to live vicariously through their child, trying to make them perfect, trying to push them. You know, at first it's kind of, you go do it. And then it's, nope, you have to do it. You have to do it better. You have to do it better. You have to do it better. You have to be the best. You have to be the best. You have to be the best.
It's a very poignant song. When the song came out in 1995, it didn't really mean that much to me because my parents had never been that way. Luckily, they were never the sort to push me to succeed for their own personal satisfaction. At least I never felt that. The experience may have been different for my siblings, but I was allowed to shift and change from hobby to passion to occasional pastime without being forced to excel. I was encouraged to do my best, but that was it. But in hindsight, with kids of my own and all that in the rear view now, it is a very real thing, and sometimes it can be consuming. I think most parents have fleeting thoughts, especially parents who were athletes or musicians or whatever, to think that when their kid throws the ball for the first time or strums a guitar for the first time, that, oh my God, they're the best athlete or best musician. And if I just push them a little, they could be professional and not have to worry about actually working for a living and scraping by. It's a very slippery slope
Yeah.
that you go down, that you're like, oh, my kid picked up a pen with their left hand. They're left-handed, and they're going to be the best left-handed ever. It's just, I think in your head, that's what you see. You're seeing something else, and the best for them. She said about this song, the song is, did you read this? About the plight of an overachiever? You did.
Yes. Yeah.
That she was sobbing on the ground when she wrote it? Yeah, that she was bawling. The song sounds like this.
Before you screw it up, how many times do I have to tell you to hurry up? With everything I do for you, the least you can do is keep quiet. Be a good girl. You gotta try a little harder.
It's a quieter song than the first two. And the first real indication that this album won't just be the angry girl yelling her way through the record.
Yeah.
But really emoting and sharing all of her feelings on a variety of subjects. And there's a quote that speaks to the special bond that her and Ballard had developed right at the beginning, and this seemingly huge amount of trust she had in him. He said that there was so much nonverbal intention in her vocal. You could hear there's the cry in the sound of her voice. What is that emotion? What are the words that go with that? And somehow she was able to do it. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing to witness, and I was sort of hearing her do it as I'm making these tracks, and we're kicking stuff back and forth with the music, but she's writing furiously and then singing some, writing, singing, writing, singing. It was great. Sitting on the floor. Never would sit in a chair.
Yeah, it's this song. The minute I heard this and started to read about it, I was like, okay, this is definitely like a song about her parents pushing her to achieve more. And she claims it's not autobiographical, but then you read all of those stories about, as she was writing it, she was literally sitting on the floor and crying because it was hitting so close to home for her.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when she performs this live, she dedicates it to, quote, all the Catholic schoolgirls out there, end quote, having been one herself, and, knowing that that's part of that for her. Excuse me.
Excuse you.
Yeah, but it's also, this song's very important because this was the first song Alanis Morrisette performed for her audition for Guy Oseary from Maverick Records. And he said of this, quote, within, I don't know, 20 or 30 seconds into the song, I was done. I was already blown away and never heard anything like that. And I wanted to sign her. That was really it for me.
Yeah.
So the first 30 seconds of this song is what made this whole album happen, which is pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. Lightning in a bottle, you know, you got to
Yeah.
catching it at the right time.
Yeah. And to continue the additional musicians on this, guitar in here played by a guy named Basil Fung. He's a session musician who's played with a ton of different people over the years, and he's currently a member of the Never Gonna Die band Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons.
Oh God.
So yeah.
Frankie Valli still performing at 91.
Yeah. I considered doing the Four Seasons when we did rotating rosters a few years ago, but I didn't have the strength. I was like, this episode will be 9 hours long. I can't do that to anybody. So
setting a world record for podcasting.
Right. The 9-hour long podcast.
Hand in my pocket.
What are you doing with it in there?
Just, it's just in there.
Oh, okay. What's the other one doing?
Nothing. Oh, it's flicking a cigarette. It's giving a peace sign. It's doing all that stuff.
Piano.
It's another huge hit for Alanis is what it is. And like you ought to know, not released as a single for sale, but the second single released from the record. But even without the sales numbers, it was still able to get to number 1 on the modern rock chart again. Also became her first number 1 hit single in her native Canada. And I think this is a very interesting approach to selling albums. Normally, selling out singles was a way for labels to create buzz and drive people to buy the whole album, especially if you had an intriguing B-side with it. But this was the exact opposite way. Make you buy the album to own the single.
Yeah.
And it seems it's a little backwards. And there was part of me that feels like it was a little disingenuous to do that. Like, I guess you could have gone to you could have gone to, I don't even remember the name of the damn record stores that you could go and put headphones on and sit in a booth and they'd let you just sit in there for a while with the freaking headphones.
You could do
on.
that at the Virgin Megastore.
Yeah.
Or Sam Goody.
Sam Goody, yeah. There were, So I feel like you could get around that. You could be like, I only like these 3 songs. I don't want to buy the whole record, but it's just, I'm not crazy about that idea. But, and maybe that's because the format's so skewed now that we're so used to being able to just go, I want this track and this track, and the rest of it I will never listen to, which is kind of the impetus for doing this podcast in the first place, actually, which is a little bit weird, but but it's a pretty normal sounding pop song. There's not a lot to it. Subject matter seems straightforward enough. It's kind of how all of us feel all the time in our early 20s. Free, but I'm focused. I'm green, but I'm wise. Everyone at that age feels like they know more than they actually do. And this is a pretty clear acknowledgement of that fact. And the song sounds like this.
I feel drunk, but I'm sober. I'm young and I'm underpaid. I'm tired, but I'm working, yeah. I care, but I'm restless. I'm here, but I'm really gone. I'm wrong and I'm sorry, baby. And what it all comes down to is that everything's gonna be quite alright. 'Cause I've got one hand in my pocket and the other one is flicking a cigarette.
Alanis Morissette has done this big series of interviews that are available on Spotify. And in one of them, she said about this song, quote, I was scribbling all these dichotomies and dualisms. Human beings are all things. At any given moment, if you said, what are you feeling right now? I'd probably be feeling 16 different things. It's rare that I feel one emotion at any given time. So I thought, I'm just going to chronicle in this moment right here while Glenn's out of the room. When Glenn came back in the room, I showed him the piece of paper and he started playing while I sang the lyrics. We wrote that song in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So this is yet another one to add to our big ass list of musicians who are so incredibly talented, and their brain has just been processing in the background for a long time, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, there it is, and they just here's a super hit, amazing song that everybody's gonna love. There it is.
Yeah, and it's such an easy song to listen to, and you can come up with. We used to spend our time, my wife and I, coming up with other things she was doing with her hand, because flicking a cigarette, playing the piano, like ordering a pizza, like throwing a frisbee, whatever. Uh, all that stuff. But so producer Glenn Ballard put this track together using a Lin 9000 sequencer, and he
Mhm.
planned to replace all the sounds with live instruments. But when they tried it, it didn't sound nearly as good as this. So they ended up using the demo version, which includes Alanis on harmonica. Um,
Yeah.
Apparently, this was supposed to be the theme song for the show Dawson's Creek, and was used in the unaired pilot episode before producers shifted to using I Don't Want to Wait by Paula Cole.
Yeah.
Um,
I read this in two different spots, and I read both ways. That one was the producers decided it wasn't quite the right fit and they shifted. The other was that Alanis at the last minute pulled the rights and said, I actually don't want that to be used as the theme song for this show.
I think they're both
I
okay.
Yeah. I mean,
No, not both
interesting.
songs. I think both reasons are okay.
Both reasons are fine. Both songs are,
Yeah, and I don't think we'll be doing a Paula Cole record.
I don't
No
think so
offense,
either.
Paula Cole, if but
If you listen to this, if you listen to this podcast or this stream, Paula
she's like,
Cole, our personal apologies.
she's, I can't believe it. Beat by Alanis again. Right through you.
What's through me?
Right through you. So we're right back to angry Alanis.
Oh,
Right? And
yeah.
this time she has her sights set on some record executives that probably, wink, wink, took advantage of her in a number of ways. Sleazy record bosses that prey on female artists. The lyrics,
Yeah.
to pretty much tell you, right? You took me for a joke. You took me for a child. You took a long, hard look at my ass and then played golf for a while. Your shake is like a fish. You pat me on the head. You took me out to wine, dine, 69 me, but didn't hear a damn word I said.
It's heavily implied if you read between the lines and look at the time frame that this probably happened to her when she was about 14 years old. And this is also probably the same guy from her 2002 song "Hands Clean."
Yeah.
Yeah, gross, really gross.
Really gross. So yeah. So Lannis's label in Canada, where she had been a child star, they dropped her because she was maturing into an adult artist, and they were terrified of her maturing into an adult artist because she was writing songs, and she's going to be honest, and so they were better than her previous stuff, so they knew she was going to get popular. So they got rid of her. So they dumped her. Sleazy is like it's just the beginning of it. But anyway, it sounds like this.
You pat me on the head. Took me out to wine night 69 me, but didn't hear a damn word I said. She right through. I know right through you. I feel right through you. I walk right through you.
Man,
Sounds
nobody takes
good.
me out to wine dine 69 me anymore.
Really? Nobody?
Nobody, not even my husband.
Oh, come on. It's a bit grungier than the last
is.
couple of songs, kind of flopping back and forth between the acoustic and electric guitars, a la any number of bands from that period. But the guitars, when they come in, they sound really good. They're very thick. Again, it's a very full mix. It's right around that loudness war period, but it doesn't sound that way. It doesn't sound clippy.
They did do a very good job of engineering this album, and it doesn't have any of those mid 90s like, okay, this is meant to just absolutely blow your speakers out so that we are louder than everybody else.
Everybody else.
Yeah. On that guitar front, Joel
Yes.
Shearer from the alt rock band Pedestrian playing the guitars here. Very good job. I'm not familiar with Pedestrian, so I don't know what kind of a guitarist he is, but
Nor I. But Forgiven. Oh,
Forgiven.
Matthew likes this
Hey,
song so
yeah. What
much.
my very first note is, hey, it's a Matthew song.
Oh, Matthew
Uh,
likes this song. So why does he love it so much?
hmm,
Because it's
what,
another scathing takedown of the Catholic Church.
hmm, what a surprise! Who would have thought?
Not only that, it's very stylized like
Hmm.
a hymn. It has
Yes,
a
it is.
rising chorus, very much like a Catholic hymn, and it moves in and out of these minor keys, also like hymns. I think that's so smart. That's just really well done. As we mentioned earlier, she was raised in a devout Catholic family and went to Catholic school for much of her life, and she was taught, that if she wasn't a virgin when she left her teens, that she must be a whore.
Yep.
And the sins that she had to confess to, she has to do so to a man that probably wanted him for himself anyway. The hypocrisy is outstanding. And the song sounds like this.
I never forgot it, confusing as it was now. Fun with no guilt feelings. The sinners, the saviors, the loveless freestyle. See you next Sunday. We all had our reasons to be there. We all had a thing or two to learn. We all needed something to cling to, so we did.
I absolutely love this song so much.
It is. It is a really good song. I actually like this one. This is one that I was not super familiar with before listening to the album from beginning to end, and I like it quite a lot.
Yeah, so the lyrics in there, I sang Alleluia in the choir. I confessed my darkest deeds to an envious man. My brothers, they never went blind for what they did, but I may as well have. In the name of the Father, the skeptic, and the Son, I had one more stupid question. So there's the confession part, right? Her brothers never went blind, as we are all taught we would if we were masturbating. But she might as well have gone blind herself because how much she was shunned for her sins. And I love the inclusion of the skeptic in that part because, again, we're all taught in secular school that there are no stupid questions in secular school. And then in Catholic school, we are all taught never to question things, especially our faith. It is
Yeah.
the most ridiculous thing ever. So frustrating, such bullshit. And does it meaning faith, give a degree of comfort to some people? Sure, it does. But at what cost? Loss of self, that's the cost. I absolutely adore when artists take on this topic and say things I don't know how to say. I love this song.
Interesting. You've never indicated that before.
Really? Oh,
Yeah, not once.
okay, well, I'll put it in a few. I'll put it in the next episode.
Okay, cool. Continuing our string of guitarists, a guy
Yes.
named Michael Landau on here, another very famous session musician and a producer. He's played with musicians like Boz Scaggs, Joni Mitchell, Rod Stewart, Seal, Phil Collins, Stevie Nicks, Miles Davis, and Michael Jackson.
Oh,
So
that's a pretty good list.
it is a pretty good list. There's even more. I just narrowed it down.
Yeah. You learn?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, well, you could.
Oh,
but
that's the next
this was the fourth single released from Jagged Little Pill. Another worldwide smash. The song was the album's third single to reach number 1 in Canada, peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Top 100, charting high from strong airplay following the release of Ironic, that was before this. It reached number 1 on the U.S. Pop Songs chart, number 7 on the U.S. Modern Rock track chart. And the song is what? About living your life to its fullest potential and realizing that things in life happen for a reason. Right? It's how we learn from those experiences that help us mold us into the person we are today. I guess at one point she was robbed in L.A. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
I
read
heard
that.
about this. Yeah.
Yeah, she was robbed on an empty street by some guy with a gun, and she got really bad anxiety and had panic attacks and was in the hospital, attended to psychotherapy sessions, and none of it worked. So she started to really focus all of her problems on lyric writing for her
Yeah.
health. And that's, go ahead.
Well, I would say she, in fact, when she was robbed, in her bag, her backpack, she had some of the demo tapes.
Oh,
And so she got, this guy came out to rob her and was like, give me your wallet, give me your keys, give me, everything. She gave him all that stuff. And he was like, lay down on the ground. And she was like 100% certain. She's like, if he steals my bag, the demos for all these are gone. I don't know how I'm going to recreate it. And he left her with the bag.
oh,
So got her money, got her wallet, got, everything she had in her pockets, but left her backpack. And because of that, this song is the way that it is today.
yeah. So according to her, Glenn Ballard was the first real collaborator who encouraged her to express her emotions and sing with her emotions. And the song sounds like this.
You live, you learn, you love, you learn, you cry, you let, you lose, you learn, you bleed, you learn, you scream, you learn. I recommend biting off more than you can chew to anyone. I certainly do. I recommend sticking your foot in your mouth at any time. Feel free.
It's such a smart song.
It is.
It's another gem that makes the record really easy to listen to. There's not a lot of fluff on this record. There's maybe a couple songs. It reminds me of Hysteria in that regard. Every song
Oh, yeah.
seemed to be written to be a single.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of padding on it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. Head Over Feet.
I think this
What?
is it's another wonderful song. What?
And it's a song about a healthy relationship.
It really is.
What is that doing on this album? Was this a mistake?
I don't know. She got one in there. She got a good relationship in there. It's about finding that one really amazing love, but not because it was like a hot and passionate right away, but
Yeah.
because they were friends and developed a trusting, caring relationship for one another before any of that stuff grew out of it. It's a very deep, special love. And the chorus kind of explains it all. You've already won me over in spite of me, and don't be alarmed if I fall head over feet, and don't be surprised if I love you for all that you are. I couldn't help it. It's all your fault, right? Perfectly.
Yeah.
Did I say head over feet or head over heels? It's head over feet, right?
I honestly don't know what you said. And now I don't know what I said.
No, Kyle
So-
said head over feet,
Yeah.
but in all the info that you gave me, it's head over heels.
Oh,
Fair enough.
my bad. So,
Anyways,
for anyone on YouTube who's about to listen to the clip or watch the clip, it's going to say head over heels. I mean head over feet. Sounds like this.
You've already won me over in spite of me, and don't be alarmed if I fall head over feet, and don't be surprised if I love you for all that you are. I couldn't help it. It's all your fault. You are the bearer of unconditional things. You held your breath and the door for me. Thanks for your patience.
Nope. Head over feet. It's so great. The other person in the relationship knew from the very beginning that she was who they wanted and was prepared to be patient and see how much they loved her and knew she would come around. She said this about it. She said, when relationships get healthier and healthier, we somehow equate that with not being as passionate or as sexy. I've kind of realized that it's actually sexier when there's less drama. It's been better, and I never thought that that would be the case because of the whole clingy, overdependent roller coaster that oftentimes seem very passionate and very sexy. And when I wrote Head Over Feet about this particular person, it was the first time that I actually had a glimpse of what it would be like to be in love and have it be something that was inducing of the heart palpitations. Yet at the same time, I could spend a couple minutes and actually not think about that person, and it was all very new to me. It's
I
pretty
love,
healthy.
yeah, I love some of the stuff when she talks about this stuff in interviews and things. She's so articulate and so well spoken, and I love it.
It's awesome. And we said got to number one Canada again, not released for sale in the U.S. again, and actually stayed at number one in Canada for 8 weeks, becoming the biggest single of the year. So
Wow.
great song. Mary Jane. Gee, I wonder
Yeah.
what this song is about. I'm
So
kidding.
according to
This is
Alanis Morissette, it's not about weed.
this is not
So
Rick James' Mary Jane. Yeah.
I see where you're going with that. Yeah,
But it's actually about a person named Mary Jane.
yeah. It's a woman who's losing her self worth and her will to live because she's in this horrible relationship, and then Alanis comes along and encourages her to be selfish and take her life back for herself, which I think is a great message.
Yes, it's this isn't one of my favorite tracks on the record, but I wouldn't call it filler because it's actually a really sweet song. It's just not a
Yeah.
sound that I connect to, but it's still excellent. It sounds like this.
Hear you counting sheep again, Mary Jane. What's the point of trying to dream anymore? I hear you losing weight again, Mary Jane. Do you ever wonder who you're losing it for? Well, it's full speed, baby, in the wrong direction.
I do like the organ work on it a lot. Again, played by Ben
Mhm.
Montench. There's just something about it doesn't appeal to me. Listening to it more often than other songs on the record,
Mhm.
but it doesn't make it a bad song because it isn't. It's
No,
still a really good song.
I definitely feel like it's a little out of place on this album. Like if you took this track out, you would still this still would be a great album.
And that's
So
I think I allude to that at some point that you could lose one or two songs on this record and it would have been a tight 45-minute album. Or would have been just jam packed. So you wouldn't
yeah,
have stopped for a second. Like you wouldn't have skipped the next song. Ironic.
no. So I got to speak first on this one, Matthew.
Okay.
Comedians, pontificators, every asshole that you know
Uh-huh.
has already talked about it. I think we should not. I think we should talk about the song, but I know what everybody wants us to talk about. I don't think we should talk about it
Okay.
unless you have a ton of notes about it.
I
that are
don't.
like
I don't.
absolute bangers. But
No, I was gonna talk about got to number 11, or actually debuted at number 11 on the Billboard
right,
Top 100. It's her highest charting single on the Top 100. There's a bunch of chart work. Again, it was on Canadian charts for a long time. It's safe to say that she dominated the Canadian charts for about
Oh,
2
yeah.
years. All I was going to say about it was the biggest takeaway for a lot of people for this song is the fact that it's a lot of things that are not ironies, and comedians and talk show hosts talk about it, and they were merciless at her for using the word incorrectly. But isn't the most ironic thing of all that none of the ironies in the song are ironic? I mean, that's silly, but
I mean,
it's so meta for 1995.
right. Well, the other trick behind that too is that both she and Glenn. I mean, look at her writing. Do you really think that she did not understand what that word meant?
Exactly. She's talking
And
about
Glenn,
dichotomies and dualities, and she knew exactly what irony means.
on top of that, Glenn is his degree is in English.
Yeah, you think so
Like,
so you can't tell me there isn't a bit of irony in them releasing
yes,
things that are not ironic.
yeah,
I think
and Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That's fine.
I was saying it actually started too, where Glenn tells this story in a couple of different places, but he recalls the exact date that they wrote the song, May 26, 1994. He said, quote, "Our process began with lunch at Emilio's Trattoria," which still exists, by the way, up in
Oh,
a little bit north of Hollywood,
nice.
over chopped salads and iced tea. I recall her saying something like, "Wouldn't it be ironic for an old man to win the lottery and die the next day?" We were fresh with this thought when we walked into the studio 10 minutes later. This was the beginning of true magic between us.
Hmm.
So just kind of an offhand comment at lunch, and then they went into the studio, wrote a whole song about it.
So this is my favorite song in the favorite part of the song right here.
It's like rain on your wedding day. It's a free ride on your royally paid. It's the good advice that you just didn't take. And who would have thought it figures? Life is fun, boring. I'm sneaking up on you when you think everything's okay and everything's going right. And life is a funny way. Nobody had when you think everything's going wrong and everything blows up in your face. Traffic.
Why is it my favorite part, you ask?
Hmm.
So do you know the actor Donal Logue? That guy? He's
Not
been
off
around.
the top of my head, no.
He's been around a long time. But during the early '90s, he played a character called Jimmy the Cab Driver on MTV, and he was greasy and had giant glasses on, and was generally pretty funny. He was a pretty funny character, and he used to sing along to passengers in his car from the current hits. And one of those songs was this one, where he used to sing, "It's like rain on a rainy day." And he would just sing it. Oh, it's like a rain on a rainy day. And I have never been able to get that out of my head ever. To this day, if this song is playing, I still sing it like Jimmy the Cab Driver and have a good chuckle. I know. I'm a simple man. But the damn thing is funny. Besides that, it's just a damn good song. It just, seriously, it's like rain on a rainy day. That's the biggest irony of all. But
That
funny,
is.
not funny. Funny, but not funny. This was one of the songs on the banned list in 2001 post 9/11 because of the verse where she says he waited his whole life to take that flight, and as the plane crashed down, he thought,
Oh,
well, isn't that nice? And I get it, I suppose. But were we all that sensitive in 2001? It's not like she crashed the
well,
planes. But just mentioning that in a song was enough to get it banned.
this is another one of those cases, and I think, funnily enough, Family Guy pointed this out perfectly. There's a line where they say something like, there was 3 complaints that came into the FAA, and as you know, one complaint means 100 million people complained. So that means 300 million people complained about it.
Oh
Like
boy.
it's something like that. But in all honesty, there's almost always a few very vocal people who are like, oh, pearl clutchers. Oh my God, what?
Oh, the
Oh,
pearl
and
clutchers. I
the
haven't heard
pearl
that term in a
clutchers.
while.
That's one of my favorite terms of all time. Pearl clutchers. For no gross reason. I just think it's a great way to describe people who panic about useless shit.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Like I remember a bunch of songs being banned. I didn't know this one was on there, but it makes sense that
Yeah.
if it's going to mention an airplane crash, then okay, I guess. But it, it was a very weird time.
And as the plane crashed down, he said, "Well, jet fuel can't melt steel beams." What?
Oh, now you're
What?
going to put it. Now
What did
you've
he?
done it.
What was that lyric that he just said right there? What was that?
Now you've done it. Our views are definitely going to go up after that.
Our views are going to go up. Banned on YouTube.
That's all right. We'll be on a watch list after this.
Yeah.
Not the doctor.
Fade to black.
Nah.
Randy, did you fade us to black or nope? No, the government just took over the whole thing.
No.
Not the doctor. So these last 2 songs are not songs anyone really knows. And this
Yep.
may be the only filler on the album. And like I said, I think you could have easily left these 2 off, maybe another one before, and had a tight 45 minutes. But it's okay. But it just or wasn't a single, and it probably wasn't widely heard. It's she's looking for individuality and freedom in a relationship, and some identity, and not just to be an extension of someone else and someone that person hides. The opening lines to the song are, "I don't want to be the filler if the void is solely yours. I don't want to be your glass of single malt whiskey hidden in the bottom drawer, and I don't want to be a bandage if the wound is not mine, or not mine." I think it's safe to assume that she did not have a lot of healthy relationships in her teens, because
Yeah.
all of these men that she writes about seem like assholes, except for that one. Except for that
Yeah.
one, and Head Over Feet. But it certainly
Heads or
fits in
tails,
with the
of
rest of the. Yeah, it fits in with the rest of the record, but it's a little too reminiscent of the other songs, so it's not one of my favorites specifically. Have a listen and you decide.
I don't wanna be the filler if the void is solely yours. I don't wanna be your glass of single malt whiskey hidden in the bottom drawer. And I don't wanna be a bandage if the wound is not mine. Lend me some fresh air. I don't wanna be adored for what I merely represent to you. I don't wanna be a babysitter, you're a very big boy now. I don't wanna be a mother, I didn't carry you in my womb for 9 months. Show me the back door. Visiting hours are 9 to 5, and if I show up at 6:10, well,
It is a pretty good song. Like I honestly like this one. I can see why. Again, it just doesn't quite fit on this album to me. Like,
Right, exactly. That's just where I'm at. Like it's
Yeah.
just, and it's a little too rhythmically. It reminds me a little bit too much of a couple of songs earlier in the record. So are we retreading as we get deep into the playlist, into the running order for a record? I don't know. Wake Up though.
Wake Up,
Yeah,
the last track on the album.
yeah.
I was trying to remember and I couldn't find it. I swear to God, there's another album that ends with a track called Wake Up.
Hmm.
Maybe one that we've even talked about in an episode, but I couldn't. I searched for it for a couple of minutes the other day. I was like, "Fuck it, I'm not wasting my time with this."
It's certainly possible.
But this is the last breakup song on the album.
It's another man baby though.
Yeah, it is. It might be the same man baby from Not a Doctor.
Right. He likes to bitch and moan about everything apparently.
Yeah,
And nothing makes him happy. I like snow, but I don't like
but
the
only when it's
cold.
warm.
Right? I like rain, but I don't like it
But
wet.
I like it to be dry.
Right?
Yeah.
Seems to be that she's saying that he loves the idea of her and her being around, but having her around all the time, and when she gets too close, he pushes her away. But it just sounds like another little man baby.
Yeah, I
Uh,
feel
it
like she
sounds-
had to put up with a lot of those.
I think so too. It sounds like this.
to the to the There's no love, no money, no thrill anymore.
Musically, I like this one a lot more than the last one. I do.
I'm just gonna do
Backmasking.
that behind you while you talk. It's fine.
Okay. It has a
Sorry.
really good melody, and again, shows her working more in some minor keys and nearing some Eastern sounds, something her next album focused on
Yes.
to some degree. And while I think she could have left the last two off, this song is good enough to make it. I think I would have left this one on here. It's good.
It does make me wonder, do you think that they were kind of working on this part of it and then they just took some material that kind of maybe sounded similar to this to make the next album.
I know she took 2 years or a year and a half off before the next record came out. I know she spent time in India,
Okay.
probably doing an Eat, Pray, Love type situation, and just escaping the machine that she had been part of for 2 years. But I think that's where that influence came from. But she definitely seemed to be working in that direction. But all in all, were she and Glenn Ballard breaking any new musical ground with this album? Probably not. But lyrically and attitude wise, she was absolutely setting a new precedent for female artists,
Yeah.
giving them an anger filled voice, although she would temper that with the next album right away. That, my friends, is called growth. You know, like a lot of bands that stay in that rut that made them famous and just keep churning out the exact same record because they know they could sell it. She grew up and out of a lot of those attitudes. In a lot of ways, it made her less popular as her career progressed. You know, I think this album made her a superstar. And I'd call her a star now, but I don't know if she's a superstar anymore in that kind of next level stratosphere type thing. And that's probably how she wants it. You know, she's able to write music at her leisure, and she's able to tour when she feels like it, and she isn't part of that machine anymore, and wasn't really right away after for the next couple records.
I would definitely say, just judging from some of the interviews and things that I read and watched with her more recently, I think she's happy. I think she's happy being, in that situation where she's not having to constantly produce, having to constantly create new music. She gets to do it at her own pace and work through it on her own time and come up with her own ideas.
Absolutely.
So,
I think it still stands out as one of the finest records of the 90s and one of the most popular records in history. And it's a good record to listen to. It's nice and easy to listen to, and it still sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
And we want to know what you have to say about it. If you're if you're watching on YouTube, hello. Don't forget to comment. And don't worry, some of you are commenting already. We've had more comments on there, and I'm getting negative comments, so that's like a new thing for me. Apparently, Kyle and I, during the Yes episode, talked too much about pizza. I don't remember ever talking about pizza, but someone said you guys talk too much about pizza, and I didn't quite get that. And then another guy told me I don't know what I'm talking about because Alan White didn't play on George Harrison's record. He played on John Lennon's record, and I quoted it directly from the documentary that I watched about George Harrison that Alan White played on that record. But he said, "You don't know what you're talking about, you idiot." And I'm like, "Oh, wow, negative press. This is weird."
Awesome. I can't wait. I cannot wait for people to start absolutely just hounding me about everything. This is going to be wonderful. I fuck up so frequently. Yeah, all right.
But we're happy that you're watching. Please, continue to comment. You can find us on YouTube at Audio Judo, or you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Audio Judo, or X at Audio Judo, or Instagram at audio_judo, or you could send us an email at info@audiojudo.com, and we'll be happy to discuss anything with you within reason.
Mm-hmm.
And you got some shout outs there, Kyle?
I do have some shout outs. Diane and Simon C. are UK consultants at the Shout It Out Loud tier. Thank you both so much for your support. John R. and Michael A. at the Front Row Seats tier. Thank you both so much for your support. And Michael A., Christian S., David W., Kristen K., Michael S., and Scott K.
Yeah, you got it.
At the Backstage Pass tier. Thank you all so much. We could not keep doing the podcast without all of you. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have very exciting stuff coming up. The mariachi thing that you got that keeps jumping out of my head.
Mariachi El Bronx.
That's it. And Jane's Addiction and a whole slew of fun records to talk about, and then our holiday episode and our top 10 albums of the year. So stay with us.
Please.
And we will talk to you again in 2 weeks. Until then, everyone, bye-bye.
Bye bye.